Cheers. This is Randon Lessing, Associate Director for Risk Management at Berkley Industrial Comp. I'd like to thank all of those that are attending today's presentation. The topic we're going to be covering today is chemical burns and a growing workplace threat. We're going to talk about prevention from both an employer and employee perspective. Joining me today is Daniel Finn, Senior Risk Management Consultant, as well as Dave Rapachetta. If you would like to interact with us, the microphones and cameras are turned off for webinar presentations. Please hop into the chat room if you have any questions, and we will do our best to get those answered before the webinar is completed here in the next 30 minutes. If we can transition over to the next slide, please. So the outline of today's presentation is we're going to discuss why chemical burn prevention is important. We're also going to discuss employee burn prevention methods and best practices. We're going to also cover employer burn prevention methods and best practices. We're going to briefly touch on the Risk Management Center, which is a free resource for all of our policyholders, and it has several resources for HAZCOM and that will assist you with burn prevention. And we're going to wrap this up with a call to action and provide everyone with some resources that they can utilize following the webinar today. Take them back to your place of work and utilize those. And we'll discuss those in greater detail as we conclude the presentation. I'd like to turn the time over now to Dave Rapachetta, and he's going to discuss why chemical burn prevention is important. Take it away, Dave. You got to make sure you got your microphone, Dave.
Sorry, Randon. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Rapachetta. My role within the company is I'm a risk management consultant. I have roughly over 13 years of experience in heavy industry, in addition to over 20 years of experience in the insurance field. I have a lot of knowledge when it comes to chemical burns with prior work experience. According to the latest data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, a total of 16,550 non-fatal burns occurred in the workplace in 2024. Of these, at least 3,540 were related to chemical burns or corrosions, basically ingesting a corrosive agent. The case study we have up on the screen, a 52-year-old employee died after suffering fatal chemical and thermal burns while inspecting a barium sulfide wash cone with a steam line that was left open. The company determined the incident could have been prevented by following required safety regulations. Some key takeaways from this. This highlights the importance of using appropriate PPE and the potential for delayed symptoms with certain chemicals. Even if a chemical exposure seems minor initially, decontamination and medical attention can be crucial. Also, this underscores the importance of adhering to safety regulations and the potential for severe consequences when procedures are not followed. The incident also highlights the risk of secondary injuries during inspections or maintenance activities. The World Health Organization, the WHO, has identified the workplace as the most common place for burns to occur in addition to the home. Chemical burns occur when a part of a person's body, such as their skin or eyes, comes in contact with caustic or corrosive substance, including acids, pH levels less than 7, alkalis, pH greater than 7, solvents or irritants. Some specific chemicals that may cause burns include sulfuric acid, nitric acid, hydrochloric acid, phosphoric acid, lye or sodium hydroxide, ammonia, phosphates, sodium carbonate, lithium hydride, peroxide, white phosphorus, gasoline, concrete mix, battery acid. So these chemicals have a wide variety of purposes and uses, from detergents to goods production. The BLS, once again, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, indicates that some of the most common injuries are associated with employee burns, chemical burns, including manufacturing, construction, mining, agriculture. specifically trade contractors, plumbing and heating. So these are a lot of our type of clients. This is why this is the information we wanted to bring to your attention. The most common signs and symptoms of chemical burns include redness, pain, numbness, and or burning in the affected area, blistering or black dead skin in the affected area, problems with vision if the chemical gets into the person's eye. This is why PPE is extremely important. Know what you need before you use the chemicals. And it's important to know that a chemical burn may appear small and seemingly minor, even though there could be a severe deep tissue damage below the surface. It's important to always seek medical attention if you are unsure about the extent of the injury or know how to treat it. Now I'd like to transition this over to our colleague Dan Finn, who will continue on with this webinar.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, my name is Dan Finn, Senior Risk Management Consultant here with Berkley Industrial Comp. I've been in the safety and loss control industry and construction ever since 1988, and as a nice follow through to that unfortunate incident that Dave outlined there, we're going to go over some items here to talk about what, as an employer, some burn prevention. We're going to talk about engineering controls and administrative controls, and go into some other what the employee can do. But as far as the employer is concerned, you know, the engineering controls, and at the top of the list there would be your facility design. That's your overall campus of your process, your factory, place of business. And this could include, you know, the layout of the land as far as, you know, include anything like a side spur for the rail cars, tankers coming and going, bulk storage facilities, your loading docks, and as well as any diking or any safe for the safe chemical handling aspect. So again, your facility design, you make sure that the place is maintained and it's level, it's stable, grounded, level, well lighted. Certainly the well lit portions if you're running 2 or 3 shifts per day, and make sure that lighting is there for the folks working those darker evening hours of any type, handling any type of chemical transfer. Certainly have those facilities and equipment task oriented, you know, well maintained, and proper signage, not only for your own employees, but for visitors as well as delivery personnel and your contractors that are bringing material into your facility. So it's all very important for that facility design. Closed systems within your design. Okay, these are the processes, systems that used to transfer and handle equipment within your facility of these chemicals, primarily liquid state, but they could be gaseous. And again, you want to make sure that this is all sealed piping. The containers themselves are sealed and covered, and any automatic dispensing to reduce indirect contact. Because that piping, you want to make sure it's properly labeled and legible. Again, any piping that isn't needs to be tagged and placed into service for maintenance to take care of that. All your valves definitely need to be labeled. So the proper dispensing of material and or filling is used to the valve that's labeled for that material, because you don't want to have a reaction of some incompatible materials being filled into a pipe that's designed for something else. Again, easily accessible and maintained properly. So again, these closed systems are there. And as well as the for valves, you want to make sure too that any overfill prevention valve items are inspected and part of that closed system, because pressure can build up in these systems that are undetermined or it could be unanticipated. So again, environmental heat, sun heat, things of that nature. So we go into that, then we go into tank silos and blenders. Again, those reactors, make sure you have access to those, labeled, maintained, documents, vents and hatches are all there as well. So the emergency equipment, or I'm sorry, the ventilation. When you install the ventilation, fume hoods are always important, exhaust systems to minimize any airborne exposure. Ventilation hoods, even in your QC lab, very important to have that. So general dilution ventilation, specific task ventilation, and also the overfill prevention items need to be vented as well. And any of that exhaust systems from there certainly need to be exhausted in area either out of a stack or away from any other air intake within your facility. Then the emergency equipment, again, ensure that your emergency showers are all in place that are there. eye wash stations, and OSHA refers to the ANSI Z 358.1 standard, and they make sure that they're accessible and maintained through proper design, placement, water temperature, and inspection. These need to be located within 50 feet of the area, so it's less travel distance, and a 10-second run for an employee who has an emergency. They need to be serviced and inspected, and obviously employees need to be trained on their use. There's a minimum.
Okay, it looks like for whatever reason, Dan has dropped off the presentation. Hopefully we can get him back. So we're shifting gears, administrative controls, training, lockout, tagout, job safety analysis, job hazard analysis. You at your organization may refer to it as a standard operating procedure, or maybe some other term. I've heard lots and lots of different acronyms on job sites. But the reality is HAZCOM and training that's specific to your chemicals needs to be that specific. Whatever chemicals that it is your employees are using, we need to be specific on how we train them. They need to know the hazards associated with that chemical, as well as what protocols they need to follow to prevent a burn. And again, those protocols are going to be specific because each chemical tends to be a bit different. Labeling and signage, I've heard the term called a smart workplace. You want to have signs that are clear, easy to read, using pictograms and really easy to use images is very helpful. And you want those posted throughout your workplace. Kind of the rule of thumb that I've always used is if I were to do a tour with somebody that does not know how to, doesn't know anything about my business or the workplace, does my signage keep them out of danger? So we want to keep everyone out of danger. So we want to post signage in a manner that would prevent them from getting harmed. Safety data sheets, you are required by the HAZCOM standard to have those readily available to your workers. A lot of times now with technology, we're able to do that via cell phones and tablets or computers that you have at your facilities. Generally speaking, I would suggest that you back up the digital system that you have with at least one binder. I would avoid getting multiple binders at your job site because that does become near impossible for your safety or your safety lead team to keep up with and audited. But you are going to need to have that to comply with the HAZCOM standards. Standard operating procedures. Again, these need to be specific to the chemical and the equipment that your workers are using. Generally, we're going to start that process with the risk assessment protocol. That is going to be something that we provide to you guys following the call today, to where you really investigate and follow the steps and process to make sure that none of your workers are being exposed to harm. Purchasing practices, the biggest thing that we need to know here is we don't introduce a new chemical or substance to our workplace without somebody knowledgeable approving that. We do not want to introduce something that's really nasty from an environmental or safety perspective to our workplace. So all of those chemicals need to be reviewed by a knowledgeable person before they're purchased. And again, we always, as from a safety perspective, need to have substitution and or elimination. So if we have to use that chemical, we need to ask ourselves, is there something out there on the market that we can introduce to replace that chemical that's safer? The biggest one that I see often is, hey, what we're using now is water-based paint. That's really a good example, common example of substitution, to where you're introducing something to your job site that's far less hazardous than other paints that are out there on the market. So, and then elimination's always best. If we don't have to use the chemical, don't. If we don't need it at our job site, get rid of it. Get it off the job site. That's just going to help you from compliance and a safety prevention perspective both. Apply and demonstrate the training. The biggest thing that I want to communicate here is once the SOPs have been developed, you have your risk assessments, you have JHAs, make sure that a supervisor is spending time with your worker your employee and they are demonstrating to you that they actually understand what they've been taught. Really, the only way to do that is a job field observation and or on the job training. But somebody that's knowledgeable needs to spend time with those new hires, make sure that they understand what they've been instructed to do and that they're doing it properly. Lockout tagout is critical when we talk about chemical burn prevention. I know a lot of the various scenarios I've been involved with, which were bad accidents, lockout tagout more than likely would have prevented the incident. Those lockout tagout protocols need to be specific to the equipment or machinery that you have at your job site. That's a general industry OSHA regulation requirement. It's not, depending on what you have at your facility, that can be really a difficult thing to comply with. However, you have to take the time and make sure your lockout tagout protocols have been written in a way that's specific to your machinery and that your employees have been trained to that. And then your employees follow lockout tagout. So if you see something torn open on the floor space or your facilities, make sure your management's taking the time to ask them a few questions to make sure that lockout tagout's being followed. That's a quick 20-second spot check that can really avoid disaster. Work mindfully. Behavior-based safety is huge. When you look in the mirror, that is the number one person that is responsible for your safety at the job site. So safety starts with you. I'm sure you guys have heard all those slogans, but we do got to take care of ourselves. We got to be brother's keeper, make sure that all those that are around us are working safely. And when we see them not being safe, we're taking stop work authority. We're asking them to stop what they're doing, making the spot on corrections. This doesn't have to be rude. It doesn't have to be impolite, but we do need to take time to stop them and make the necessary corrections. The biggest thing that I want to communicate with SWA or stop work authority, all of our policyholders should have a stop work authority policy. It's a way for your it is a way for your employees to reach out and stop work. Meaning, if something's unsafe, it's the last line of defense for your management team to make sure that that job site's safe. Encourage them, have a culture to where they can call the safety lead or their frontline supervisor, stop what's going on and seek a solution. A lot of times safety is problem solving. So if they identify the problem, allow them to stop work until we can get it resolved, and then we can continue on in a safe way. Allow your employees to suggest corrective actions to improve upon the processes, safety suggestion boxes, and just creating a culture where that frontline worker feels comfortable to report and communicate with the supervisor. And periodically you need to be implementing changes to your processes, or else we're not managing safety properly. Very rarely do we write a lockout, tagout, an SOP, etc., where we've addressed everything that needs to be addressed. So we need that feedback from frontline workers in order to make sure we're doing everything right. Slip, trip, and fall prevention. Fall protection is huge. Slip-resistant shoes, boots, slip-resistant flooring and coatings on walking, working surfaces, and then housekeeping. Make sure that unnecessary equipment's removed from the floor. Extension cords are wrapped up. I've been involved with investigations where somebody slipped on because of poor housekeeping, and they fell into a more or less a chemical and suffered a burn. So huge, very important. And then environmental awareness. Whenever something is extremely hot, extremely cold, or we're dealing with inclement weather with frost, snow, ice, that can lead to a leaking plant or facility. We always have to be mindful of those things. Next slide. Hygiene and housekeeping. Immediate decon or decontamination is extremely important. A lot of those protocols, if you need decon, you're going to be able to identify that by doing a chemical specific risk assessment, reading the safety data sheet. Those showers that Dan had already spoke about earlier, those have got to be available. And with a shower, you have to test those to make sure they're actually operating and clean. The worst thing is you have a burn exposure or a burn situation. They go over to utilize the shower and it's filthy, or they can't even get into it because we've decided to store stuff in there. We need to make sure that we keep those walkways and access to that clear, and that it's operating. Again, good housekeeping. We always have to be cleaning. We have to clean up residue and make sure that we have a clean facility. A lot of times you call it the eye test. You'll hear a lot of safety consultants talk about that. We walk into a facility or a job site. A lot of times safety's of that site's fairly easy to engage based on what we see. If it's, equipment and it's a mess everywhere, generally there's some breakdowns with safety. So that's always the eye test is a great way to see where you're at. And if your job sites look like a mess, you need to focus on the housekeeping and management of the site. Food and drink policy, this one's huge. Food and break areas need to be designated. They need to be separated from where chemicals are. The other thing, I see that's generally not the problem, but often chewing gum, depending on whatever chemical it is that you're using at your job site. A lot of times the worker cannot be chewing gum or tobacco, that type of thing. So make sure that if that's the case with the chemical you're using, that information is communicated with your workforce. PPE, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, rather than mention you are required by OSHA to have PPE risk assessments conducted in general industry standards. So if your job site falls under general industry, your PPE risk assessment has to be conducted, and it has to be specific to the work that's being performed by the workforce. So that starts with a general risk assessment and identifying what PPE needs to be mandatory on your job sites. Again, that has to be posted and communicated to the workforce. And in most scenarios, as an employer, you are required to provide the PPE to the workforce. Again, that's per OSHA standards. So, and then the main thing is make sure that you have multiple sizes available to your workforce so that PPE properly fits them. If it's way too large, it's going to be uncomfortable. They can trip. You need to make sure that it's all fitting them properly and that they have multiple sizes to select from when they get ready to get their PPE on. Next slide. Okay, well, transitioning over, the Risk Management Center has, it's robust. It has a lot of training resources, and it's a built-in online learning management system. Specifically, it does have a tool that allows you to build out a digital library of safety data sheets and then have that library be accessible to your workforce. Another tool that it's available to you is we have, it's the pictograms that's required by the GHS standards. You have to have pictograms on secondary containers. So if you have, let's say, lacquer thinner in a large drum that is labeled, and your employees take that product out of the drum into a secondary container, you cannot put that just in a cup or a container. You now have to have a label to place onto the secondary container. The Risk Management Center has software that will allow you to build those. You can enter in the pictograms as well as the hazard warning statements from the safety data sheet, and you can even print those off on sticky labels. So awesome resource. It can greatly help you comply with the HAZCOM standards. Next. All right, so now we're going to conclude with our call to action. We are going to provide everybody with a safety meeting stand down resource. We're just going to ask you in your next safety meeting, safety committee meetings, Toolbox Safety Talk, however you have or host your safety meetings, please use that resource and conduct a safety stand down related to chemical burn prevention. A good idea, you may want to talk about the chemicals that are specific to your job sites during that safety stand down and what PPE and work protocols required to make sure that that chemical doesn't burn or cause an incident. And then as an employer resource, we're going to circulate a chemical risk assessment. Again, we talked a lot about being very specific to the equipment and the chemicals that are on your job site. This chemical risk assessment has checklists and some things for you to fill out that's going to be specific, again, to the chemical. After you've identified the hazards and the precautions that you're required to take, you can shift gears and then begin to brainstorm on what controls are in place. So the one thing that we are unable to do for you as a consultant is tell you right away what control you need to implement to prevent that chemical from causing harm at your job site. The solution to chemicals can be very complicated, from ventilation systems all the way down to, hey, we're just going to substitute that chemical for this chemical or this product that's far safer, and we don't have to worry about implementing controls. So the solutions to your chemical hazards ranges, and it's all over the place. It starts with a risk assessment and start walking through the process and determine, do we have lockout, tagout? Do we have PPE? Do we have SOPs? Have we done a JHA, JSA? And if the answer to that is no, you need to hit a pause. You need to start with the risk assessment, and you kind of got to start all over with the process to make sure you're implementing those controls. You see on there a QR code. We're asking that all of you take a few minutes and do a survey following. Please wait until we circulate the recap email and you see the resources that we're going to provide to you guys. But we'd really like to get open feedback from our policyholders on, was this helpful? Were the resources provided to me useful? That type of thing. Again, you can do that by scanning that QR code that's up on the screen. Questions. Before I hop off today, I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. Any questions that you may have, I would like to ask that you put them in the meeting chat here. Please do that. I will try my very best, myself and Dave, to answer those right here while we're on the call. Again, if you do not know who your assigned risk management consultant is with Berkley Industrial Comp, please email us at the email address you see on the screen. That's riskmanagement@berkleyindustrial.com. That will route to our team. We'll make sure that your questions are relayed to the appropriate consultant. We'll give you a call. We'll send you an email. We will do our very best to help support you. That's what we're here for. Again, that QR code, there it is again. Please scan that, conduct the survey. That concludes the presentation.